Derrick, I'd like to call him a friend. He's been an outstanding ally and friend and great source of knowledge for me for some time. Derrick was a Kennesaw State, so he has a bit of an interesting background of coming from the college side of things and now being with the Texas Rangers for 9 years. So he's been with them for quite some time. And by having that kind of 30,000 foot view of the baseball world gives him a very interesting perspective to youth athletics, to high school, and then to college. And understanding that what, say, Kennesaw State is looking for and what Florida State is looking for and Tennessee's looking for and then what the Texas Rangers are looking for, those are 4 or 5 different things. And how all of this plays back into where we're at. We've just been talking about analytics. We've talked about recruiting. This is a next good step for us to kind of working through that same vein. Derrick Tucker, Texas Rangers.
I appreciate you guys having me out today. Like you said, I spent a lot of time in college after I got done playing, and then I've currently been with the Rangers now for 9 years. So, Chance wanted me to talk a little bit about like just the evaluation process, kind of how some of those things are different from the different levels, and then how things are a lot alike. And so, as I started like thinking about it, basically like the recruiting process, or basically it's more like the evaluation process as it is now, like has not changed a whole lot for me as I've gone on through my career. And I want to talk about like that process, how we like evaluate things, how we gauge stuff, and then also like how that factors into like you guys as coaches and parents, how we can do things better, some things that maybe I messed up on, which a long list of laundry there, and how we can do a better job of like translating that into our coaching styles and our practices and things like that for players. So for me, like the evaluation process is basically like 3 components to every player. And I started this, like when I first started, it merged into some other things, and now I'm right back to it. And like trying to simplify it, basically like every player has these 3 components. You have your just pure raw talent. And like this is your God-given ability, this is your size, your strength, your raw tools, your arm strength, your speed, things that you can improve on, but for the most part are going to create separation naturally from you and like different players. The second piece is which I'll talk the most about as far as like right now, because I think it pertains to coaches and everybody more, is the skill level of the player. So the skill level of the player, I'm throwing that in a bucket, and that's basically like how well you're able to play the game, how well you're able to repeat your movements, how efficient you can be as a baseball player to use that talent and build your skills so you can use that talent to be a better baseball player. And then the third piece, which is like way more important on our side, is like, especially as we've gotten more and more information, but we'll talk a little bit about the makeup piece, who guys are as a player, what makes them tick, how they compete, and how they do different sides of like day-to-day practices, and do we want that person in our organization. So like 2 sides of makeup, we'll get a little more into it at the very end, but you're basically talking about your character and you're talking about your competitiveness. There's a lot of people that are very successful missing one of those pieces. And there's a lot, but the great ones usually have both. So I know like the first thing that I ever really dig into while I'm watching a player that I'm trying to answer is how competitive is this player. The character piece comes later, and all things equal, is a huge separator as well. We want good guys in the clubhouse. We want winning people and winning personalities. But just a little bit about the raw talent. Like the one misconception about this piece is that you basically are given what you got by your gene pool and by your God-given ability. This is something that like needs to be focused on very much so from an early age as possible, and building your physical strength. Like, so you can increase your raw tools and your raw talent by your strength. And your power at the plate, your arm strength, your ability to have balance as you transition through body movements, whether it be as a pitcher or as a hitter, all go back to this strength base. I see this piece missing a lot from amateur, and probably, if I'm being honest, myself as a player missed a huge component of like the strength base. My skill level was very high. My makeup, character, so. I like to compete a lot. So, once I got to college and once I started playing with a lot of other players with the same skill level as me, I was missing this strength. I like to play basketball. I like to play baseball as a catcher, shortstop, playing football, trying to do as many different things as I can and stay out of the weight room. So you're going to see the big difference between a college catcher right here, not very big, And Todd Pratt, who's coming next and speaking, this is a major league catcher, and you'll see what he looks like as well. So like having this strength component like needs to be a piece of like the development when young kids, and it's super important to make sure that kids understand that sometimes being in the cages 7 days a week for 5 hours is not always the best for your like long-term development, and you need to spend time focused, whether even if it's just push-ups or squats or flexibility, mobility, all these pieces to increase that. So it's a huge factor in our like evaluation process from the pro side, because this game has changed a ton. It is a power game. You have to have power at the plate, you have to have power on the mound, and you have to be able to impact the game a lot in one like burst. And if you get left behind from a strength standpoint, it's just super hard to compete at that level. Skill level is the second piece to this. Like I said, we'll talk probably mostly about the skill level because this is what we're all trying to do and train. And as from a coach's standpoint, this is what we have the most impact on. The raw talent a lot of the times goes back to the individual on their own, what they're doing when they're not at practice, what are they doing in their off-season, nutrition. So it's important to talk about, but like I said, we'll kind of focus on the skill session part of it. So from a skill level, basically like we talked about, skill is the ability to play the game. It's our mechanics, it is our basically baseball IQ, how well we're able to process information on the field, and how well and how efficient we're able to put our natural talent into the game to play the game from a skill level. So I know like we talk like analytics, like I listened to the back end of McLaughlin's speech, who was a very good pitcher, working on some stuff there, and he talked about just like the release point. Like the velocity that we train for, doing drive line and long toss and strength training and power and weighted balls and all that stuff, like that's all great. That's all raw talent. How you repeat that delivery, how you repeat where you release the ball, how you command the baseball, how you're able to change speeds in your field, that's all the skill level that we have an immense amount of control over and where we need to focus. So like, I think you can tell a lot about a person's skill level by how they do their pre-game work, and it's super important a process for me as a scout when I'm watching Vanderbilt, Tennessee, top high school players, anybody like that. I will never watch a player without taking an immense amount of time watching how they prepare to play the game. Because what I'm looking for is their attention to detail. That's going to be a direct translation over to how well they are able to repeat and how well they're able to use their talent once they get into the game. You can tell so much about a player or pitcher by the way they warm up and the way they throw. And if I have one like piece of advice for any coach from a 3-year-old T-ball team to our major league level, it's have some type of direct throwing program when you start to practice. Like it's the first piece of practice. It's the first piece that most people don't pay a lot of attention to. And throwing the baseball routinely and getting your body in a good position is like, it just sets a benchmark for the whole practice. Like being able to throw the ball to an exact spot on the body, being able to get yourself in an athletic position, being able for as a young kid to understand direction, which is probably the most important part for a young kid, making sure that everything's square, we're landing, we have good front side, and we're using our body. Like that's how you're going to learn balance, and that's like one of the best skills that you can have. So like that focus in that part, if you're doing it as a group and you're playing some type of like game or you have some type of transition where you're like you're starting square and then you're adding in your feet, you go through an actual process building that up to long toss and then building back in, is going to be like, get your mind right for that part of practice. And then we can translate everything else as we keep moving forward in that spot. So there is like a balance between like, obviously we talk about skill, we talk about like the mechanics of doing everything. This is like a super gray area for me personally. And I think when my first job at Division II, I was at North Georgia College right when I got done playing. I was a hitting coach, and the first thing I wanted to do is I wanted to teach everybody how to hit. And I'm going to like change the game, and we're going to get down there. And anytime somebody got out, we go back to the cage, and we're working more mechanics again. And I found like the mechanical part can suck the life out of talent if you make it too big of a piece. Like obviously there's parts in the swing, and there's parts in the delivery that you have to hit to be successful and to be able to repeat. But just like Chance said earlier, like there's no perfect swing, there's no perfect delivery. What's perfect is the ability to be able to repeat something and be able to use that talent level in your skill. So like trying to like back off the best year we ever had at Kennesaw State. Well, I left that fall, but in 2014, Kennesaw went to Super Regional. They lost to Louisville, almost went to the College World Series that year. We had a lot of very good players that understood that process. And we had probably the most simple hitting philosophy like you ever have in college baseball. Like to the point where people would come ask and like they'd be like, "Oh, he don't know what he's talking about," because we didn't have like a ton of mechanics. But we like literally every day at BP for about 2 straight years, we lined the cones up down the middle from gap to gap, and we hit the ball as hard as we could inside those cones. And what I found like super fast was these guys started understanding balance, timing, and how to like repeat a swing over time. And then the launch angle and the home runs and all that stuff started taking up because that launch angle happens like at contact or slightly after. And when we started getting too mechanical, trying to teach things early in the swing or all the other stuff, things got like super diluted and it just didn't work out. So there's like such a fine balance between doing all the mechanical stuff and then also being an athlete and using what talent we have and what strength we have like balanced out. So I know we're all in the business of like getting guys in the right position to hit, but it would be my personal advice to tell every young kid is like focus on the mechanical parts that create balance and create a sense of repetition that you can repeat that swing. And then once you can repeat a movement, whether it's delivery or swing or something, now we can really dig into the deeper mechanics of that. And that's something that builds up over time. Like, I mean, a 5-year-old and a professional athlete are two different stages of their mechanics. They can really dig in, but trying to teach a 5-year-old how to hit like Josh Donaldson is probably not like the best thing long term for that kid. I mean, he's built such a sense of timing, rhythm, and balance from an early stage that he can create that extra, separation in his hips, and he can drop his barrel and go because of that elite timing. But to try and teach somebody that doesn't have those basic concepts of hitting that, you can see a lot of struggle there too. So, skill level is basically like what separates us when all things become equal. So like talent is super important. That's what I'm looking for. It's the first thing that attracts me to a player. At Kennesaw, like Sean was talking about, like different programs recruit different things. It was always my gauge at Kennesaw. We're going to recruit the most talented players possible, and then we're going to work on the skill because I felt like skill was an easier thing to develop at that time. If we're going to compete with Georgia and play with Louisville and Georgia Tech, like we at least had to have matching talent. It was going to be almost impossible for me to go in there and out-skill someone. So that was just my philosophy on it. Different college programs do different things. Mercer has had a ton of success, and they do things complete like flip. Like Brent Shade and those guys, good friends of mine, they are super high skill level players. That's what they want. They want guys that are all very polished. They want their pitchers to like low 3/4. There are a lot of sinker guys, throw a ton of strikes, where I wanted the 6'5" guy that threw 95, and then hopefully we'll figure some stuff out later. If it doesn't make it right, they got us some, we got them some too. So, but I say that as y'all were talking about recruiting, I was like, you want to find a place for your player, son, anything like that, that is good at developing the things you need help on, and also values like the pieces that you're good at. Like if you came to Kennesaw and you threw 88 and had great touch and feel, like you weren't going to get on the mound a lot with us because we had a lot of big bodies that threw really, really hard at the time. And that's what we valued. So we would put more time into those guys developing their skill, and we'd let them go through the walks and the failure because we knew at the end of the day that would give us more chance to win long term. So if you, like I said, finding a spot for your talent level is like super important. That's where you got to trust your like Chance and these guys that know these college coaches and programs and find a fit a spot in there with you. So third piece of all this, like we talked about, is the makeup piece. Like this is who you are as a person, character, and how well you compete. Like I said, for me, the most important part is like learning how to compete and putting guys in position to fail where they can like get through that and learn what it's like when things get tough. So character is obviously like a huge piece of the puzzle, like especially now with social media and all this stuff. Like when we talk about a player in the draft room, it is uncomfortably like wrong how much we know about these kids. Like especially like in the top 5 rounds, we took a kid named Evan Carter out of my area last year at a Tennessee. Talking about like a $1.1 million player right now. I can probably tell you more about this kid than his mom can at this point. Like it's the amount of in-depth stuff and research that we can do is like unbelievable. They'll hire private investigators if there's like bad stories and stuff, and it's wrong. So like it's super important as your players to know that like these Twitter feeds, these Instagram, Snapchat, all these things, you're building your career resume. And when you go approach these schools, like you're talking about, you want to send like your stuff, you want to send a Twitter video to Georgia Tech, and you call, hey, Mr. Hall, this is, you know, Derrick Tucker, I'm interested in being a catcher at Georgia Tech. Here's a video of me doing some defensive work. Like, I guarantee you the first thing he does, he's got his baseball ops guy or Ramsey or somebody, and they're coming through and they're seeing who you hang out with, how do you speak, do you have respect, are you going to be like a good member of this institution? Because now you only get 27 players on scholarship. COVID messed that up a little bit, but for the most part, that's how many you get. And if you have a player that's getting in trouble and kicked off, like you've put your whole organization in a bad spot. So from a character standpoint, I think you can handle a lot right there and create a lot of problems there. Like, I know I messed up a ton and we probably all did, everybody sitting in this room, but we didn't have everybody like knowing everything we did, thank God, right? Unfortunately, that's not the case anymore. So I would love to open it up for questions if you have any questions about like the recruiting or evaluation process. Like I said, I did the recruiting part at 3 different levels before I took the job with the Rangers, and been with the Rangers 9 years, so do have a decent amount of experience there. If I can help you anyway from that.
I have a question. It's not about recruiting, though.
Yeah.
So I know one of the things you said is getting kids to compete. How do you get young kids, 12, 13, 14, to get into the environment to compete? You know, when I was little, it was just get after it every day. And now these kids are coming from PlayStation, Xbox, doing whatever they do at home, and the only time they're competing is for the hour and a half, 2 hours of practice. Is that something you can teach or help them with, or is that just kid by kid basis?
Yeah, I think you can always help anything.
Yeah.
How far you can develop that, I'm not sure. I think there has to be a structure at home. Like if you're at practice and you're pounding at these kids, like, all right, everything we do is a game. Like when we do our throwing routine, like you're gonna play a point system with your partner, winner stays on, loser off, or however. Hopefully, like some people don't care about losing though, and that's something that like comes from within. If losing doesn't bother you, I don't know how much you can develop the competitiveness.
Yeah.
That's something that like as a scout, I'm always trying to gauge.
Yeah.
Like when I talk to college players, like I have all my Zoom meetings with the Vanderbilt guys, and I'm talking, hey, who's the most competitive guy on your pitching staff? Who's the most competitive guy on your in your lineup? If you have one pitch to get it out, like who are you taking? Like that says so much about you. I think you still have to create the environment where you're almost forcing them to compete. And if you have to make it more fun than strict, then that needs to be that way that day. If you have to make it more strict than fun, maybe it needs to be that way. Like I don't have the experience of coaching 12 to 14-year-olds, so I don't want to tell you how to do your job. But I think that's a huge challenge, even like in school, like at Division II level, competing was a huge challenge for juniors and seniors because these guys, most of them weren't getting drafted at that level. They were moving on. They saw the light at the end of the tunnel. They knew they weren't going to play past college, and they wanted to go ahead and focus on having fun or their grades or whatever. So creating that environment was like a difficult task there, and that came with just like I think they feed from you a lot. If they know you have passion and care, and they know you're competing all the time, then I think those guys will follow you. And hopefully, you put kids on the team that want to compete if you have a choice of like how you're selecting guys.
Yeah.
Don't you think as player developers and coaches that we can foster that? It's almost like we try to, in this politically correct environment, we try to take out that competitiveness instead of, I would much rather have a kid that's tough to coach because he wants to win every time, because he has to learn boundaries, versus the kid that I have to try to motivate to be more competitive.
Sure.
Versus I think today's day and age, we don't want to have winners and losers in practice. We don't want to have, we want to make sure mom and dads are happy in the end of practice. Versus, if Gunner beat Jackson in a running competition, then we pour on the gas a little bit on Jackson. Hey, he crushed you. Those old school ways that we used to grow up, I feel like they're out of the amateur side right now because we don't want to offend anybody.
Yeah, I've seen that too. Like in scouting high school players and college, like that pure passion and drive to like win or lose does get left behind sometimes, like trying to appease too many people at one time. So you're constantly going to have that battle. Like when I talk to high school coaches now, they say the same thing. When I talk to college coaches, that seems to be a common theme. But the good ones create an environment where whether they have the option to select the right type of player, or that they've just been doing it so long that it's expected of the new people coming in. And I think that's where, you know, it might take more time, but if you've created an environment, or like, I don't know if you guys move up with your teams, like from 12 to 13, 14, or how that works, but I think the more time you have with people over time, and they know that's the expectation, and that becomes the norm, then it's easier to foster that kind of environment with your kids. So I know, like, when you go watch Vanderbilt practice or play, or University of Florida or Sullivan, like these guys, from the time they step on the field, it is a driven competition and an immense amount of attention to detail, like with everything they do, whether it be their throwing or their BP routine, and they have such a fundamental value of how to compete and how to focus, that translate to, you already have a lot of the most talented guys, now they add this skill component to it with the makeup piece of wanting to compete and everything, and it kind of runs the people off that don't want to compete. If you have the majority doing one thing, the minority will either follow them or they will leave, and then if they leave at that point, then that's okay, I think. I mean, obviously, you're also running a business and you're running a team, and you have to have players and you want to win, but I think that environment's going to be better. It's more sustainable long term if you do create that as an overall culture. There's also an extremely fine line between making everything about winning. And you said earlier, sometimes it's not about the trophies, but it's also about the development. And there's always opportunity to win more games or do more. If you never put any of your players in opportunities to fail, or if you have a left-handed hitter and he's always struggling with a left-on-left breaking ball, and the game's on the line, you're going to put in your righty hitter, and then he doesn't get to face him. He doesn't get that chance to fail. And so sometimes we learn a lot more about our failure and what we need to work on with our skill level. And so you can still teach competing, then teach that kid, hey, you failed, we've got to compete harder, we know this is something you struggle on, we need to work on, ambushing a fastball left on left, or we need to sit on a hanging breaking ball up early in the zone if we know that's what they're going to throw. Foster that environment where they still, even though they failed, we're still talking about competition. It's okay to fail. Now how can we compete once we get back in the cages, so when we get that opportunity again later in the season, we can succeed. College, I felt that was my most miserable part about coaching college, is you did not have that opportunity. It becomes about winning and stuff, and once they're there and they've already developed, you have a very hard time developing players' weaknesses in game situations. And that's where in professional baseball, if I had a kid and I was telling you the pros and cons, we can develop your weaknesses at an exponential rate compared to anybody else. Because if you're struggling left on left, or you're a right-handed submarine pitcher and you're having trouble getting your fingers on top of a changeup to a left-handed hitter, then we can put you in that situation and let you fail miserably over time until you figure something out or you quit, one of the two. And we have that, ability to do that. But that whole passion of winning and competing and all has to run through daily. And I don't think you can fake it. And that's why I like watching kids warm up. I like watching kids practice, because this is something that's innate inside you, and it's not something it's something that's developed over time. The way your work ethic, how you compete is you can turn it on for a day, but when I go watch a kid play, if they know I'm there, this is college, Texas Rangers, you want to go to Kennesaw State more than anything in the world. I'm coming to that day. You can fake it for a day how you play that day. You can play with energy and passion. Things that kids I find don't fake. They don't fake their relationships with their teammates in the dugout, and they don't fake their preparation because they don't even know how. So guys that don't learn to prepare right at a younger age, 12, 13, 14, by the time they're 16, 18, they don't even know how to work on their weaknesses anymore, and they don't know how to prepare before a game. And they'll always be behind, because it doesn't matter how talented they are, the raw talent. And I've taken plenty of raw talented kids without those pieces. Don't get me wrong, talent is important. But at some point in your life, you'll always come up against somebody with more talent, and then it's going to come down to your skill and your makeup pieces of everything else. process. And I think it's super important for young kids to understand that even when they're having success, that there is somebody out there better, not even better, but equally as you. And like, who's going to build these talent pieces that are going to help you like, be a more consistent player when things get rough.
Questions? So I was told by somebody that he will one day be a general manager. So.
I hope not. I got a kid on the way. I gotta get home.
Exactly. Well, you can afford to bring them all wherever you need to go if you become a GM.
Yeah.
So, no, to give you guys a little bit of background I know that I've sent a couple videos just initially. Really, Derrick's been instrumental in helping us work with the relationship as far as working forward organizationally for Titans baseball and Texas Rangers. I know one of the things that we've got for our older age groups now having access to a team that's going to Jupiter, having, obviously the best players that got to be able to play, but having an opportunity for be able to work with Rangers and having them on their Jupiter team, as well as guys that are eligible and need to be going to East Coast Pro. So, hit 15, 20 home runs this spring, and hey, we'll, see if we can't fit you in there. And at the end of the day, it's about one, helping our players grow and develop and having access to some of the best minds that we can steal some of the things they have and right size it for a 12-year-old player, 11-year-old player, 13, 14, 15, understanding that some of the things, like for example, I had an opportunity to sit with Danny Clark last weekend. So some of the things that are coming down the road will be between Danny and Chuck and myself. Danny had talked about some basic throwing regimens. So we're going to have a throwing routine that will be standardized across the organization for when you come inside for an indoor practice. And that's a little unique because most people, what I find is that, especially in youth and travel baseball, you get into a negative spiral. So what I mean by that is that you start playing in January and like, hey guys, easy on your arms, we're just starting. You guys have been playing basketball, we got to ease into it. So then February, the very first tournament that you can play in, it's going to be 31 degrees at 8 a.m. And it may be a whopping high of 45 on the day. And everybody's like, hey, first tournament, we got to get out there and play. And they're really not ready to throw, and they haven't been throwing a lot, because when you come inside, January, February, for the most part, the weather's crappy. So you're going to throw some bullpens, and then you're going to hit, and then when you do get on the field, you're going to throw, and everybody's like, oh, it's cold, easy on the arms, and all this kind of stuff. So we start playing. And then if you have a really nice team, and say you go to the semifinal. Hey, well, Monday or Tuesday, we have practice again. Hey, guys, easy on your arms. Everybody's like, oh, my God, my arm's killing me. Right? Thursday, we're going to play again this weekend. Easy on the arms. Got to throw our bullpens, but easy on the arms. So you do that 5-6 weekends in a row, and basically you have a bunch of weekend warriors. Because they never had the proper workload to be commensurate with what you were actually going to perform at. So, and we as adults know, that's why I refuse to play like adult league baseball. One, because I know I'd suck, and my ego just could not take that. But the other part of it, I know that I'm not going to work out during the week and do enough throwing and enough hitting so that on the weekend I don't tear something on the ER on Saturday afternoon, right? I just refuse to do that. But what we're doing is we're doing no different with our amateur travel players because they don't have a commensurate workload. So one of the things that we talk about areas of opportunities and areas that we could create some structure that helps you guys, but also prevents injuries for you guys, but also kind of helps us identify organization. So that's where we're working with Danny. We came up with the throwing program that we're going to use inside. That'll be coming out in the next week or two. The other things that we'll have is we'll have a throwing program that we'll have for under 12 years old. And so, for example, your 11-year-olds are going to be a little bit different than, say, his 12-year-olds. And you're going to have to monitor that, but it will be the same throwing program for you as you. You may have, so that'll be where at 11, you're going to figure out what your max distance is for those two guys and try to partner them. And you're going to have two guys that try to partner the weaker throwers with the weaker throwers and the harder throwers with the harder throwers. But you're going to have to assess because after 2 weeks, those weaker throwers could be stronger throwers and they may need a new throwing partner. But we're going to have some standardization there. So the idea here is bringing best practices that we get from the Rangers, implementing that to a developmental standpoint, and then helping our players grow and develop. So to be quite honest, to be transparent, I've told these guys that, and to their credit, they believe in us and believe in what we're doing, is that I've been doing this for 17 years, and I've never had the best players. This is what it is. I've done it for 17 years, and I've never had the best players. However, best talent. I guess that's a better way to say it. The best talent. I didn't have what I call the best team money can buy. Okay? I didn't have the guys that were all out known throwing 95 and hit it 7 miles. I didn't have the most talent. We had to grow and develop our players and teach them how to play the game. So, however, we didn't have the best team money could buy, but yet we still had 700 kids go and play college professional baseball. We've had, the Rangers had one of our guys a couple years ago, Alex Spees, first overall pick, or not a first overall, first round pick, and very talented. So basically what we're trying to mirror is what we know works from a developmental standpoint, using best practices that from the Rangers and trying to implement that into our program. So a couple of things for you guys to keep a lookout on is one, there'll be an indoor throwing program that'll be coming out. There'll be an under 12 and over 12 throwing programs for when you're actually on the field that'll be coming out, as well as the stuff that we already got from Danny, as well as their speed and agility guy, who's very, very nice. And he sent me videos as I was kind of messing with him. I was like, I don't know what show me the money means and this kind of stuff. So he did a little video, and that's the stuff that we already got out for you guys. So I'm excited about that. Now, what I would also say is that it'll be my job over the next coming weeks and months to kind of pop in with you guys to make sure that everybody's doing the same thing. Because if Chuck's 12-year-old team and the 17-year-old and my 15s and your 12s, I need everybody on that same sheet of music, because I feel like that we're getting the best knowledge. We need to make sure that everybody's doing that. For Derrick, a couple questions I have for you guys, for you in particular, where do you see the game going? Like, I know we were talking a little bit kind of off the side, like, what do you see amateur baseball looking like in 2-3 years? What do you see minor league baseball looking like in 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, minor league baseball, we are shaking levels for sure. We just got rid of our 2 rookie balls. The draft is going from 40 to more than likely 20 rounds this year, so we're taking about half the players out. There's going to be way less opportunities in professional baseball. More players are going to college than ever before. College baseball should see a huge jump in talent level and product. I think right now we take a lot of the main players out of that system. I think we still take the top echelon guys, but they're going to have to be ready to play in a good A-ball full season now, because we don't have extra roster limits where we can carry guys on younger levels. So what that's going to do is that's going to push a lot more talent to college, and I think we'll end up being not mirror, but be more similar towards like an NBA or NFL, where they'll be like, we'll have our developmental league, but I think a lot of the players, because of data and everything, makes guys feel more comfortable selecting players. Some teams do it more than others. I think we're on the middle range of analytics versus in the past, where we have huge tools and more of that raw talent standpoint trying to develop the reps. So with that being said, I think that's, you can already see it, but the data and everything is going to be getting more into amateur baseball. We do need to be more familiar with the language piece of it. I think everything that was said earlier is right. Like, I think if you don't understand that, you're going to be trying to teach and coach somebody in a different language, unfortunately. So I still think that the gut feel coaching and everything is a piece of everything. We have to use our experience. We have to know how to translate information to kids. I know, like, another question I ask pitchers all the time, like when I'm interviewing college players, is on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being every time you throw a pitch, you want a piece of information, 10 being like you never want one piece of it, where do you fall on this scale? And then what do you need from us as Rangers to do it? So we have some guys in our organization that might use it at like an in-game report and that's it. And then some guys want to edge-tronic, they want to see something, they want to see the data, they want to see the spin efficiency, they want to see the horizontal movement, they want all of it. And so I think to be the best coach, especially as a 12 to 18 or whatever age cohort we're in here, like, you have to be able to speak in both languages to get to as many kids as possible. And that also comes with, like, how do we motivate guys? How do we get them to compete, like we talked about? And his data and his visual learning and electronics and all the things we have, is that a way to help motivate guys to compete and to train at a higher level? Because that's ultimately the only thing we care about, is how can we develop skill, like we're talking about. And so
So here's a question: why? Like, I know you're condensing kind of the minor league systems.
yeah.
They're only going to 20 rounds. What is the big why?
I think, if I'm being honest, I think money probably drove that for the most part. We're having to take so many more players, and like half the minor leagues ends up being just filler kind of spots. And, investing a ton of money trying to develop more players. I think this gives us like less people we have to focus on long term.
And so with that being said, like, I know when I was coming through high school or coming through college 15 years ago, you kind of have a variation of a lot of different things. But the day of the high school guy getting signed at a high school, is that there's still going to be some of those, less prevalent, because it used to be, hey, I want to get this guy that's top prospect. I want to get him in my system. I want him to get 1,500 at bats. I don't want him to go to college because they're going to overpitch him or not train him properly or overwork him. I want to get him, and then I want to get him in my system for 2, 3, 4 years, get him to the big league level. Is that idea changed?
Organization, like difference. But I think all things equal, if we can get that guy out of high school, we would take him. I think the issue becomes, well, like we talk about, like we can train and build your weaknesses where colleges can't at all times, like in-game live, like reps. Skill is all about how many quality reps you can get, and we don't have hour limitations. We have the best facilities and resources in order to do that. So that number is going down because I think past, like analytics or numbers people that are involved in the draft now will say that, we were basically just throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and hoping it came out on top, where they feel like if they have more data that they can get in college and acquire, that they're going to make healthier decisions. So like, it's easy to go to the field and find out like, okay, who's the best player in the country? Like this year you have your Jordan Lawler, some guys around here, Harry Ford, some of the elite guys. Those guys will still be very prevalent in the draft. I think where it gets different is as we get into the 3rd and 4th round, we look and say, hey, there's 18% chance of getting a big leaguer in the 3rd and 4th round. I think it might be actually less than that. We say, but if we have all the data and everything, we can hopefully get closer to that 18% and be more successful there. Whereas by the time you're taking a high school kid in the 3rd round, like, you'd be amazed at like how quickly players with flaws are like gone. Like if you don't have flaws, you're gone. And then once you get about pick 20, 30, 40, like there becomes huge pieces missing from like what we talk about, whether it's talent, skill, makeup, like. And so now we're just trying our best and hopefully we can fill in the holes with the analytics. At least that would be the data argument.
So I'll share a little story with the guy that we kind of had a couple side conversations. He doesn't know I'm going to ask him this question, but there's a guy at North Cobb High School, Harry Ford. So Harry Ford, so that you guys know, used to come to camp when he was 11 years old. This bit. You go back to Facebook, I guarantee you, we used to have camp at the other place and we'd take our pictures, and Harry came to camp every single time. And Harry's always been a pretty good player, but he wasn't at 11 and 12 he wasn't considered to be the best of the best of the best. A nice player, bounced around. He was at East Cobb, and then he was at Team Elite, and he's kind of bouncing around. And even at 15, I remember when we were 14 or 15, we played against a Team Elite team, and it was like their number 3 or 4 team, and he was playing third base. Good player. Not what I would say like, man, that guy. So now fast forward for 2 or 3 years since that point in time. He'll probably get drafted maybe top 5 rounds?
Oh yeah,
Easy. All right, and so here's a guy that everybody always talks about. Oh, you've got to play for this team. Oh, you've got to do that. And I would commend Harry and his family's commitment. And I'll tell you 2 stories that kind of tell you a little bit about makeup, and maybe he can pass along to some other people. So Harry, again, their family are all about development and about just getting better. So there's been a number of times that I know that I've been over at North Cobb, he was throwing long toss, and he'd be by himself. He's a bucket of balls, and I'm like, hey man, we're getting ready to hey, I'll get it up, coach. And he would pick up his stuff, and then he would go down to the cages and hit by himself. Well, Adam was over there, what was this, a month ago, 2 months ago? So we had practice on one of the nights, and Harry knew that we practiced over there, and he was in the cage hitting by himself over at North Cobb hitting. And Adam whistles over and says, hey, just letting you know, I'm going to turn off the lights. He's like, okay. Just keeps hitting off the tee by himself. Well, and he keeps doing his stuff and says, hey, Harry, I'm getting ready to turn the lights off. Okay. Just keeps hitting. Well, he's like, I got to go. He goes over, turns the lights off. Well, as he's walking out, he sees Harry turn on his cell phone and set it on the bucket behind the tee and keep hitting. What I'm telling you is that he didn't look at turning the lights off as an excuse. He still needed to get whatever work in that he needed to get in. Back during the COVID break, I told my players, I said that you have quite possibly the greatest opportunity that's ever happened in the last 100 years because you have 6 to 8 weeks that nobody's playing and a lot of people are going to sit on their ass. So you could take this 6 to 8 week period and really make huge gains in your game that, I hate to say it, statistically speaking, high school kids and players in general just don't have that makeup. Harry Ford made himself into a grown man during that time. I don't know if you guys get online. There's I think there's like a minority league they're trying to form or whatever, and they have a minority prospect league. So I got the video on it the other day, and they have him like front squatting like 4,000 pounds. I don't know what it was, but it looked like a lot, right? And he was always a decent sized kid. And we, again, were practicing over North Cobb a couple weeks ago. He's walking out, and I just happened to glance out. I didn't even recognize him. He's an enormous human being. And so my point of it is that the old adage of we can talk analytics, we can talk all of those things, and are they where we're at? Absolutely. Okay? However, at the end of the day, it comes back to hard work, getting in the weight room, doing all the right things, eating the right things, getting right things to eat, getting the proper sleep. All of those things are built on the foundation of the old basics, right? And so I wanted to share that with you as well as, kind of piggybacking on what he's saying as being true. Any other questions you guys may have for him?
Speaking a little on like Harry Ford, just off that, it's like this is a guy that was missing a big piece of like a talent level, and he was missing a big piece of just the pure like physical just strength. And like you said, this guy transformed his whole entire like body, game, everything. And with strength, all of a sudden that skill level started to jump with it. And like we talked about earlier, like how important that strength, that component is to the development of all players. But the one thing that this guy had is he had on this far side, the third thing we talked about was character and then competitiveness. He had both of them. And when you put both of those together and you kind of like that's installed in you, this kid just kept, he's got like chip on his shoulder. He's pissed when you tell him he's not the best player. Like, spend a lot of time, and then, like, you see it every year. There's always the famous kid that's 14 because he's got all this God-given talent, size. He gets 100 home runs when he's 14 years old, and then all of a sudden, the little dude that's sitting back behind him gets a little bigger and a little bigger and a little bigger, and then by the time they're 18, like, this is the guy that's the draft prospect. It happens all the time. And not getting complacent in any of that is where you, like, grow as a player.
Thank you.
Awesome. Appreciate you guys' time.